Hello, everyone.
Good?
George,
Yes.
why don't you tell us what got you started in the psilocybin therapy space? What was the inspiration?
Well, there were actually two things. One was I was a large fan of psychedelics in the late 1960s and early 70s when I was a teenager and was very, very interested in the research. And then I forgot about it for 40 years. And then our son became really ill with OCD, depression. And the more he was treated, the worse he got. We nearly lost him 3 times in a year. What caused us to start this was talking to so many people who had the same experience. And we realized that something different and important had to happen.
Yeah, it's all right. Thank you. I think many people here can relate, and thank you
Yeah, I
for
think what
sharing
we realize is almost everybody has a story.
that.
So here we are.
Yeah. I'm sure many people are curious and that are curious in this space. Could you walk us through an experience?
Sure. Well, maybe what I'll do is contrast and compare. So what's the experience today using usually 30-year-old medicines and 100-year-old psychotherapy? Well, it's you take a pill a couple times a day for 6 weeks and you see if it works. And if it doesn't, then you kind of increase the dose. You wait another 6 weeks to see if it works. About 2/3 of the people aren't helped. They then switch to another medicine. They go through it again, rinse and repeat. And about 6 months later, you leave a third of the patients, which totals about 100 million worldwide, who aren't being helped. That's the story of today. And if you're lucky enough in a health system to get access to psychotherapy, that helps about 1/3 of people too. So what we're looking at is, can we do better and how can we do better? And so what our model looks like is working with three different components. Preparation. How do you help people have a profound experience that helps them change the story of their life? How do you prepare them for that? And by the way, we use macro dosing, not micro dosing. These are very large, big experiences. And for those of you who might be familiar, it's the equivalent of about 4.5 or 5 grams of dried magic mushroom. Big experiences with supervision. So we prepare people. We take them off their existing medicines. For most of those people, the medicines aren't working. They're kind of a safety net. We help them prepare, understand their life story, and let their story go, because the story that we have about our lives is carefully programmed and develops over the course of our life. And for some of us, it doesn't serve us. And so it's to help people realize there could be a different story, a different narrative, a different way of seeing the world.
What are some of the most memorable moments?
I think I'm going to just get to what we do for a second. I know I'm going to talk a bit, but let me tell you what actually happens.
Go ahead.
So, prepared. The next thing is they come into a wonderful place. It's a kind of like it's like almost a living room. A couch, a chair, usually flowers, music, and they're given a very high dose of psilocybin, or a medium or a low dose in our clinical trials. This is something we're developing as a medicine to be reimbursed, delivered through health systems, to be very clear. We're in clinical trials now, the largest clinical trials ever done with these substances. And so what happens is they come in, they're given the medicine, they're invited to put on eye shades, and they're given a special playlist that's been created for 7 hours. And they're there and basically have a profound experience. Their body is safe. They're with a therapist in a controlled area. If they get into difficulty, they're instructed to do 2 things. Trust and be open, and go in and through whatever you're experiencing. Your body's safe. There's a therapist there. And usually it's a very deep inner experience. It lasts about 6 hours from start to finish. And the next day they come in and we have a conversation about what they were shown. What did they see about their life? And unlike most clinical trials, one of the most common things we hear from people is how grateful they were for the experience. Not something you hear. often in a traditional clinical trial. Now, the results are important. At the highest dose that I mentioned earlier, we had a third of people who suffer with so-called treatment-resistant depression. This is depression that isn't helped by other things. It was never named by a patient, obviously. No one resists treatment. The treaters want to view this as treatment resistant, but it's really a lack of innovation, to be super clear. And so we have about a third of those patients in remission, no signs of depression after a single experience for 3 weeks, 3 months, and beyond. And that's some of the results we presented from our phase 2b trial. We're now working with 1,000 patients in phase 3. Okay, now I'm ready. Sorry,
Now you're ready.
I just wanted
No.
to give you a sense of what was going on.
Thank you. But going back to my question from earlier, it's like, what was the most rewarding moment?
It's two rewarding moments. The most one was kind of geeky. Because we conduct these clinical trials, they have to be completely independent. It was the moment we heard what the results were. So imagine, we've put in 50 million of investment, years of work, and then we go to this single meeting where we find out how it went. Right? Talk about product launches. And we found this result, right, of people, a third of people for 3 months from a single experience. That was really powerful for us. So that was the one. The other one was just having a patient that we talked to afterwards. Actually, I was just in a conference with Katya, my wife, was speaking, and she was hugged by a patient who said, I was in your phase 2b trial. So like that.
Yeah, like that. Thank you. I'm also curious to learn about the challenges that you encountered when you were creating a psilocybin therapy company.
Well, we didn't set out to create a psilocybin therapy company. We set out to make a difference in mental health care. And we just sort of stumbled on this, that this was an area of kind of hiding in plain sight innovation. There were some early studies that looked promising. I remembered fondly my past and other people's past. And I thought there might be something there. And we looked at that. And we spent 2 years traveling the world, probably having every single psychedelic therapy experience one could imagine with a lot of the people who were keeping this technology and this practice alive so we could learn. And then what we discovered when we started, we realized that it needed to be done as real research. And bringing a medicine to market is about $1 billion US. So this is not for the faint-hearted. There's a lot of capital raising, a lot of capability building, et cetera. So we're doing that. And I think that for me, the biggest challenge is one that's very weird. I thought it would be talking to governments and saying, you're going to do what? With whom? And what we found was that the biggest challenge was with the psychedelic enthusiasts who actually felt that developing this as a medicine and not having it be available kind of in the water supply or freely to everyone was a problem. We think decriminalization is incredibly important. No one should go to jail. But what we need to do is make sure that the most vulnerable people can have access and benefit. And the only way to do that is through evidence and data and working with the system, not working around the system. But this conflict of what we're doing as being quote-unquote capitalists in developing something that will be available to everyone here and their families, that's what we did.
What are some of the biggest lessons you've learned throughout this journey, and what advice do you have for individuals who are just setting out, building a mission-driven company?
Well, this is my fifth rodeo. I'm starting my sixth now. And so what I have found over the years, it's really interesting to create new businesses from a different state of consciousness, and I'm not talking about psilocybin. I'm talking about the different decades of your life and what you can see. I think that the biggest lesson here was really that always keep in mind that we are smarter than me. This is not a heroic founder-led. This is everything that's important and mission-driven that gets done. requires a real community. It requires, one of my favorite words, co-conspirators. You know, people who believe, who bring different things to the picture. So super important to have multidisciplinary teams when you're working on something big. We have designers, technologists, we have a huge data science team because we're actually looking at creating a new model of mental health care, not just psilocybin, but predictive and preventative personalized care in mental health using technology and digital phenotyping. So that's a very different kind of company than making a drug. And so that's important. I think the last thing that I've learned over the course for people to think about is something I learned called spiral development. 3 things. Think big, start small, scale fast.
Thank you. When you run a values principle company, what are the challenges that you run into when you're leading a team?
Well, at Compass, we call it finding true north.
Mm-hmm. What are the values or principles that you use?
First and foremost, there was a bunch of work being done by organizational psychologists looking at winning rowing teams. And the teams that did best had a simple question that they asked every day. Does it make the boat go faster? If not, let's not do it. For us, it's, does it improve patient outcomes or does it improve access? 2 questions. Everything that you do, yes, yes, go for it. I think that's really important, have that kind of clarifying question. The second thing is to develop your values collaboratively, keep them alive, and have them people be accountable to them. And if they're not, have a very public demonstration of having them leave, because that creates a cohesion. And that may be counterintuitive, but I think it's super important because everybody knows when someone isn't operating according to values, and you have to say, we care about that here.
How do you make sure in the day-to-day of the organization that these principles stay alive?
It's just how we conduct ourselves, right? In all the meetings. I mean, so we're a mental health care company. So one of the things we do is we really care about people's mental health. We talk about it, we support their families. We have 2 weeks a year, which are sustainability weeks, one at the end of the summer, one at the end of the year, where the entire company goes offline. So there's no pressure of emails from everybody. The entire company just goes offline. And we don't do that for patients, obviously. There is a core team who's there to support that, but everything that's non-emergent, we go offline. And then people come refreshed and really get into, it's like back to school time that we're all so wired to from the beginning of our lives, but refreshed. And lots of mental health benefits and so forth.
How do you train your therapists?
Carefully, thoroughly. We have an online portal where first it's selecting therapists. And when you think about therapists for this, it's about doing less, not doing more. It's about therapists who really can be there present for a patient experience. So we have an online portal, we have role-playing, we have supervision. But most importantly, we've developed a really interesting machine learning technology that sits in every single interaction with a therapist and a patient with all the appropriate permissions and so forth, that records the session, scores the session, and provides feedback to the therapist with a transcript from even a 6-hour therapy session in minutes after it, so that we really can understand how to help the mentors help the therapists fit to the model, which is like a mindfulness therapy model.
Any lessons in that when you developed this?
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson is that one of the things that's really been missing from mental health care is accountability, right? And it's okay to try hard, that's important, but can you actually make people better? And do you care about what you can do differently to make people better rather than simply be a therapeutic artist? And using data and evidence to help people be better, help the therapists be better, and help people who are suffering be better.
Tell me, George, if you weren't doing this, what else would you be doing?
I'd probably be a photographer or a music producer, and I'm getting to play with both now that I've become chairman.
That's amazing. What would you like to be remembered for?
Making a difference that matters at scale.
And just because it's interesting, I would like to know, what's your favorite word?
Progress.
Progress.
Or in England, we call it progress. Same thing.
Would you say there's a difference between progress and progress?
Progress usually happens faster than progress.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I wanted to open this up to the floor. I think there are quite a few people that had some questions.
Yes.
Yes.
Hello, hello. Yes,
Hello.
yes. Sylvia, I'm going to hand this pad over to you. I think you
Hand me
can
the pad.
you
All
can
right.
see here the questions that have been upvoted are the
Uh-huh.
highest ranking. So
right.
I'll leave that to you. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so there's a question that's like, do you have solutions or research for ketamine therapy as well?
So we are not looking at ketamine therapy ourselves, but many people are doing that. I think that it's important to see that ketamine is a very, very powerful medicine. It's being used. The problem is there's no incentive to do very, very large-scale trials because it's already an approved medicine. And so that's one of the failings of our system. There's no real incentives to do that, but it seems very effective. Our son was greatly helped by that initially, intravenous ketamine, delivered in a clinic, to be clear, not at a party.
Got it. We have a question from Jack, and he would like to know what are the drawbacks and addiction risks for psychedelic substances?
So actually there was a study done very early on, and we use this a lot with governments. The psychedelics are the least addictive of any substance. There have been many different studies looking at this. Now that's different than are they compelling? And some people like to go back into the world of psychedelics, and they don't do what Alan Watts encouraged people to do, which is when you get the message, hang up the phone. Some people find it's actually better to be in that experience than, as one psychedelic therapist says, you meet God, and 40 minutes later you realize you're a 40-year-old guy with a bad marriage and a mortgage. So, you know, it's like, it's better to meet God, right? So sometimes people like to go back for that. But, you know, it's something that we have to be careful about. Physical addiction, not present at all in these substances of classic psychedelics, LSD, psilocybin, mescaline, peyote, etc.
We have another question that is there a chance of people having a bad or a scary psychedelic experience during these treatments?
Absolutely. What we find, these are challenging experiences. That's why they're with someone. The way we see challenging experiences, bad trips, are largely people fighting the experience and getting more and more anxious than they can't make it, rather than what our instruction was in and through. Trust and be open, your body's safe. This is why it's so important to do this in a supported session with people who are there knowing how to handle these situations. Again, if you're partying and have this experience, that could happen. But when we're working with vulnerable patient populations, we have to be super, super careful. And so that's why we do what we do.
There's one more question, but it might be a longer answer, and it's about obstacles in the regulatory environment. Can you
This
name
is
one?
such a short thing.
Okay.
So
Go for it.
in my past life, I did a lot of work with regulators on accelerating access to medicines for all kinds of conditions. And so I knew a lot of regulators. And we started this by going to visit some people who I knew in regulation in Europe and the US at very senior levels. And I said, hey, I'm about to change my day job. Here's some data. What do you think? And they were all really intrigued. You could see that little sparkle in some of the older ones' mind, taking them back to their teenage years. But I think that, you know, it was all about evidence. This is about evidence. Can you demonstrate safety, efficacy, and can you guarantee that the medicine I take anywhere in the world at any moment is the same medicine, same quality, and I know what the dose is. Big deal. The difference between a medicine and a poison is dose. Most people don't know in recreational settings what they're taking or how much they're taking. That's different in this world.
Wow, thank you so much. I appreciate you being here.
Thank
you for
you.
letting me ask you those questions, and thank you guys for showing up and listening.